There are places where silence speaks louder than words, where stone holds secrets older than language, where every groove, every shadow, every unexplainable mark whispers, "We were here and you've forgotten us." All across the world, ancient clues are staring us in the face, carved into rock, etched into bones, buried beneath the ruins of temples and cities lost to time. But these are not legends. They are real discoveries that defy science, artifacts that rewrite everything we thought we knew about history, astronomy, architecture, even human consciousness. And yet, no one can explain them. Who created these wonders? How did they do it? And why do they all seem to point toward a past far more advanced and far more mysterious than we've ever imagined? This is not just a story about old stones and forgotten names. It's a journey into the unknown, into the cracks of our own timeline, where myths bleed into facts, and where what we call impossible might simply be something we don't yet understand. Because hidden in deserts, forests, mountaintops, and beneath your very feet, there are monoliths that speak no language, maps that lead nowhere, and riddles in stone that no modern mind has ever solved. Today, we begin to listen to the silence carved in granite, to the codes written without words, to the questions that refuse to be buried. Welcome to the most unsolved ancient mysteries the world still cannot explain. Part 1: The Sihote Monolith, Sacred Model or Cosmic Code. High in the Andes of Peru, beyond the reach of crowded temples and sun-beaten ruins, rests a single block of stone that has puzzled archaeologists, mystics, and engineers alike for decades. It does not tower like a pyramid. It does not glitter like lost gold. It does not even resemble what we typically imagine when we think of ancient wonders. And yet, those who stand before it often find themselves speechless. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, just a boulder, weathered, lichen-streaked, silent. But when the sunlight hits it just right and your gaze lingers a little too long, something begins to shift. The surface reveals a pattern, not random cracks or natural grooves, but something far more deliberate. Carved into this granite block is a miniature world, a labyrinth of terraces, tiny staircases, pools, channels that flow and connect, basins that fill and drain. More than 200 individual features, each one precisely shaped, etched into a single stone. This is the Sihote monolith, also known locally as the Sihote stone, and no one knows what it means. Located in the Apurimac region of Peru, this enigmatic object was discovered near the archaeological site of Concacha. Though the area bears traces of Inca influence, many believe the monolith itself predates even the rise of that great empire. It stands alone, literally and symbolically. There are no matching artifacts, no inscriptions, no companion structures, nothing to help classify it. It defies every category we've built to contain our understanding of ancient civilizations. Some scholars believe it is a scale model, a representation of an ancient city or water system. They argue that the carved grooves and pools were used by engineers to simulate water flow before constructing large-scale irrigation systems for agriculture. It would be, if true, one of the oldest known 3D hydraulic models in the Americas, perhaps the world. Indeed, experiments have been done. Researchers have poured water onto the surface of the monolith and watched as it trickled through the carved channels. The results are intriguing. In some areas, the water flows naturally, dividing into tributaries and collecting in basins. In others, it behaves oddly, pooling in unexpected places, reversing direction, or vanishing into channels that appear disconnected. This led to a critical insight. The stone does not behave like a purely functional model. If it were strictly utilitarian, meant to plan irrigation, the flow should be logical, predictable, consistent, but it's not. Some staircases lead to nowhere. Some channels seem to begin and end without purpose. Some elements appear to defy gravity altogether, which raises a different possibility. What if it wasn't about water at all? What if it was about energy or spirit? In ancient Andean cultures, water was not just a resource. It was sacred, a divine force. The Apus, the mountain spirits, were believed to watch over it. Ceremonies were held to honor its movement. Springs were seen as portals to other realms. Flowing water wasn't just useful, it was alive. From this perspective, the Sihote monolith takes on a very different meaning. It may not have been a hydraulic tool, but a sacred map. Not of land, but of meaning, of life force, of spiritual flow. Perhaps every channel was symbolic, every basin a vessel for ritual. Perhaps the stone was used not to predict irrigation, but to direct prayers, to guide offerings, to invoke harmony between the physical and the metaphysical worlds. And then there's the question of the stone itself. It's granite, not limestone, not sandstone, granite, one of the hardest natural materials on Earth. And yet somehow the carvings on its surface are smooth, seamless, flowing. There are no visible chisel marks, no cracks, no rough edges. The curves are so consistent, so fluid that they seem almost molded. This is where the mystery deepens. How did pre-Columbian artisans, without iron, steel, or diamond tools, manage to carve such intricate patterns into one of the most unforgiving stones known to humanity? Some researchers have theorized the use of plant-based acids or unknown softening techniques. Others point to the possibility of lost technologies, methods of vibration, sound frequency, or even heat that allowed the stone to be shaped more like clay than rock. These ideas are controversial, and yet no mainstream explanation seems to fit. The precision is simply too exact, the layout too intentional. Whoever carved this stone knew exactly what they were doing, and they weren't guessing. But why carve it at all? Why dedicate this level of labor, effort, and mastery to something so strange? It's not located in the heart of a city. It's not hidden in a temple. It stands exposed, on a platform, facing the sky, as if it was meant to be seen, or perhaps even experienced. And that may be the key. Modern minds look for utility. We assume that if something is carved, it must serve a practical purpose. It must be a map, a tool, a model, but ancient minds didn't always make that distinction. In many traditions, physical form was inseparable from spiritual meaning. A map didn't just describe terrain, it reflected divine order. A basin didn't just hold water, it was a portal, a mirror, a symbol of rebirth. In this light, the Sihote monolith becomes something entirely different. It is a convergence, a meeting point between science and spirit, between earth and sky, between memory and myth. It is not simply a stone, it is a teacher. A teaching tool not for irrigation, but for the soul. Some archaeologists believe the monolith may have been used in initiation ceremonies. Apprentices in ancient priesthoods or engineering schools may have studied its patterns to learn about balance, direction, flow, and the sacred geometry of nature. In this context, water may have been poured not to test a system, but to embody a principle, to represent the breath of the gods moving through the body of the earth. The stone may have also been interactive. Ritual participants could walk around it, pour water, observe how it flowed, interpret the way it moved. Just as ancient shamans would read the flight of birds or the patterns of smoke, perhaps the flow of water over this stone became a divination tool, a means of reading nature's will. And yet, even with all these theories, the Sihote monolith refuses to reveal its truth. There is no inscription, no origin story, no recorded myth that names its maker or its meaning. It is a message without a sender, a question carved in granite, and the fact that no other artifact like it has been found anywhere only adds to the mystery. It stands alone, completely unique, completely unresolved, so we're left to wonder, was it a prototype, a sacred object, a cosmic diagram, a forgotten relic of a lost civilization, or was it something else entirely? Something we can't yet name because we haven't yet remembered. Perhaps it wasn't built to be understood, but to be encountered, to shift perception, to awaken something, like a riddle not meant to be solved, but to change the one who dares to try. The more we study the Sihote monolith, the more we realize we're not just looking at ancient technology, we're looking at ancient thought, ancient belief, ancient awareness, not of machines, but of meaning, and maybe, just maybe, that's what we've lost. Not the tools, not the knowledge, but the way of seeing, a way of listening to stone, of understanding water not as a substance, but as a story. And that story still flows, etched into granite, alive in silence, waiting for someone not just to study it, but to feel it. Part 2, the Dendera Zodiac, programming the sky in stone. In the arid lands of Upper Egypt, where the Nile curls like a serpent through the desert, there stands a temple to a forgotten goddess. Its walls have eroded with time, its columns cracked beneath centuries of sun. Yet within its heart, on a single ceiling slab, rests a map so precise, so strange, so utterly out of place that even modern astronomers are left speechless. This is not mythology. This is not allegory. This is stone, measured, aligned, etched. The temple is known as Dendera, and the map is called the Dendera Zodiac. At first, it doesn't look like a map at all, not in the modern sense. There are no continents, no rivers, no cities. Instead, carved in a perfect circle, surrounded by gods and symbols, animals and sacred figures, is the sky. A vision of the heaven, frozen in time. But it is not just art. It is astronomy. It is mathematics. It is something far older than we expected and far smarter. The Dendera Zodiac was carved into the ceiling of a chapel dedicated to Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of music, love, fertility, and cosmic order. It is believed to have been created over 2000 years ago during the Greco-Egyptian period. And yet, what it depicts, what it knows, feels far more ancient. Because unlike most Egyptian carvings, which follow rigid symmetrical layouts and repetitive motifs, the zodiac breaks the rules. It is circular, dynamic, symbolic, and shockingly detailed. It is unlike anything else in Egypt. At its center is the figure of Nut, the goddess of the sky arching across the heavens. Around her are signs of the zodiac: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, names we associate with Greek or Babylonian traditions. And yet here they are etched in an Egyptian temple. Surrounding them are planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, each placed intentionally, aligned with stars, the moon, the sun. But what stuns researchers most is not just the symbols themselves, it's their accuracy. Using modern sky mapping software, astronomers have reconstructed the heavens as they would have appeared over Egypt throughout history, and what they found was astonishing. The positions of the planets carved into the Dendera zodiac match almost exactly with the sky above Egypt on a specific date, March 7, 51 BCE. Let that sink in. A temple ceiling, carved by hand, without telescopes, without computers, without modern trigonometry, shows the sky correctly as it would have appeared on a single night more than 2,000 years ago. Not just the 5 visible planets, but also the sun, the moon, and the lunar nodes critical in predicting solar and lunar eclipses. In other words, this carving doesn't just depict the sky, it calculates it, it predicts it, it programs it. Which begs the question, how did they do it? How could the ancient Egyptians, without modern instruments, chart the sky with such precision? The answer for mainstream scholars is simple but humbling: centuries of observation. Year after year, generation after generation, watching the heavens, recording by hand, passing knowledge through priesthoods, memorizing cycles, telling stories, encoding data into myth, until eventually that knowledge was carved in stone. But not everyone is convinced, because even with meticulous observation, some features of the Dendera zodiac feel out of reach. The alignment of celestial bodies, the relationship between planetary movements, the ability to synchronize so many elements with such geometric precision. It suggests something more, something deeper. Some researchers propose that the zodiac is not a product of Egypt at all, but a relic, inherited, preserved, passed down from a civilization even older, a society that possessed astronomical knowledge far beyond what we currently believe was possible in the ancient world. Atlantis, the pre-flood world, the keepers of ancient light. Whatever name you give it, the implication is the same, that Dendera may not be a beginning, but a memory. If that theory holds, then the zodiac is more than a star map. It is a message, a reminder, a warning perhaps, left behind not just to honor the gods, but to encode something essential about time, fate, and celestial rhythm. In modern science, we often think of the heavens as cold and impersonal, collections of gas, gravity, and chance. But in the ancient world, the sky was alive. Stars were not objects, they were beings. The planets were not spheres, they were forces. The cosmos was not a void, it was a system of meaning, a sacred mechanism. In that light, the Dendera zodiac becomes not just a map, but a kind of stone computer, like the Antikythera mechanism discovered in Greece, an ancient machine used to predict eclipses and planetary positions. The zodiac may have served a similar function. A fixed, physical calendar, a sacred timekeeper. But where the Antikythera used gears, Dendera used myth. Each symbol on the zodiac may have held multiple meanings: practical, spiritual, ritualistic. Aries could mark a time of planting, or war, or rebirth. Venus may have represented not just a planet, but a goddess, a mood, an alignment of energies within the soul. To read the zodiac, then, is to think like the ancients thought, not in data points, but in layers of meaning. Not in fact or fiction, but in truth that is felt as much as it is measured. One of the more radical ideas suggests that the Dendera zodiac was used not just to track time, but to shape it, to harmonize rituals with cosmic cycles, to ensure that temple ceremonies aligned with solar eclipses, planetary conjunctions, or lunar phases. In this view, time was not linear, it was cyclical, and sacred time required sacred timing. A temple, then, was not just a building. It was a tuning fork, and the zodiac was its frequency map. But even this only scratches the surface, because the zodiac doesn't stand alone. It was carved during a time of profound cultural mixing, when Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian traditions began to merge. Some believe the zodiac is a product of that blend, a synthesis of cosmologies. Others believe it marks the last gasp of a more ancient knowledge, one that was already fading, already being forgotten, even as it was etched in stone. What's perhaps most tragic is that the original zodiac no longer resides in Egypt. In 1821, the entire ceiling slab was cut out by French explorers and transported to Paris. Today, it sits in the Louvre Museum, cold, suspended, disconnected from the sky it once mirrored. A replica remains in the temple, but the energy, the weight, the silence is different. It is strange to think that something so rooted in the cycles of nature, so intimately tied to light and time, now sits under artificial bulbs behind glass. No longer part of the rhythm it once encoded, but perhaps that is fitting, because we too are disconnected. We no longer watch the stars. We no longer wait for solstices. We no longer tune ourselves to the dance of the heavens. And yet, the zodiac remains, as a witness, as a challenge, to reconsider what ancient minds may have known, to wonder what we've forgotten, to listen again to the sky, because carved in that stone is not just a calendar, not just a prophecy, not just a miracle. It is a reminder that long before we pointed telescopes into the night, our ancestors were already looking up and seeing something we have yet to understand. Part 3, the Balochistan Sphinx, coincidence or forgotten civilization. In the windswept deserts of southwestern Pakistan, near the shores where the Arabian Sea meets the Makran coast, a great stone lies still beneath the blazing sun. To some, it is nothing more than a curious rock formation, a trick of erosion, a coincidence of angles, but to others it is a monument, a message, a survivor of a time we've forgotten and perhaps were never meant to remember. It is called the Balochistan Sphinx. At first glance, it evokes a strange familiarity. Its head is raised, its body elongated, its silhouette unnervingly symmetrical. There is something about its shape that bypasses analysis and goes straight to memory. We've seen this before, in Egypt, on the Giza Plateau, a guardian carved from stone lying silent, watching the horizon. And yet here it is again, thousands of kilometers away, in a land with no pyramids, no pharaohs, no written connection to the Sphinx of the Nile. Is it merely a coincidence? That is the question that continues to divide observers. Some argue that nature, through time and weather, can produce nearly anything. Waves crash, wind carves, stone fractures, and occasionally patterns emerge that mimic form. They call it pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces or shapes where none were intended. But others aren't so sure, because the Balochistan Sphinx is not just a rock vaguely resembling an animal. It has features, defined, angular, balanced. The head appears to have a forehead, a nose bridge, a jawline. From certain angles, you can see indentations where eyes might be. The head is proportionate to the body. The posture is consistent with the reclining pose of known Sphinx statues. And behind the head, the stone slopes backward in a shape remarkably similar to the Nemes headdress worn by ancient Egyptian rulers. There are no random curves, no chaotic breaks. The lines are deliberate, controlled. too consistent for mere coincidence. Beside the Sphinx lies another formation, larger, more eroded, but no less provocative, a step structure, angular ledges, what appears to be a staircase rising along its face, rectangular doorways, pillar-like extensions. Some call it the Sphinx Temple, others call it imagination. But either way, the resemblance to ancient architectural design is undeniable. These formations are located near the sacred Hingal region, a place steeped in mythology. This area is home to the Hinglaj Mata Temple, one of the most revered Hindu pilgrimage sites in all of South Asia. Legends say this is a land where gods once walked, where rishis meditated, and where gateways between worlds were opened and closed. To believers, the spiritual significance of the land adds weight to the mystery. To skeptics, it only muddies the waters. And yet, no official archaeological excavation has ever taken place at the site. That, in itself, is a mystery. Why, in an age where we excavate everything, has this potential marvel been left untouched? The standard explanations cite remoteness, lack of funding, political instability, and harsh conditions. All true. But for many, those reasons do not fully explain the decades of silence. Could it be that no one wants to look too closely, that confirming, or even entertaining, the artificiality of the Sphinx would upend far too many assumptions about history? Because if this is not natural, then everything must be reconsidered. If the Balochistan Sphinx was carved, then by whom? There are no records. No known civilization in this region claimed to build sphinxes. There is no written tradition of monument building in this particular form. And yet the quality of the shape suggests knowledge, geometry, intent. Some theorists suggest that this is evidence of a now lost civilization, one that existed long before the Harappan, Indus, or Vedic cultures, a mother culture perhaps, one that shared its symbols across the ancient world, that might explain why sphinxes appear not only in Egypt and Greece but also in parts of India, Mesopotamia, and Southeast Asia. In this view, the Sphinx is not just an Egyptian symbol, it is a global archetype, a relic of a shared language now lost to time. And there is another possibility, one even more unsettling. What if this site, like many others around the world, is a remnant of a civilization wiped out by catastrophe? A sudden event, a flood, a pole shift, a cosmic impact, something that erased knowledge, records, and memory, leaving only the stone behind. This idea is not new. Plato spoke of Atlantis. The Sumerians wrote of the flood. Indigenous traditions across continents speak of suns that fell and waters that rose. Could the Balochistan Sphinx be part of that forgotten era? Perhaps it was a marker, a monument meant to endure, built not to be seen by its own time but by us, a message for the future, carved in a language of form, a language that bypasses words and speaks through geometry, through scale, through silence, because that is what this place radiates: silence. There are no crowds, no guides, no interpretive sign. The Sphinx lies in the middle of nowhere. It is not protected, not studied. It is simply there, waiting, and silence too surrounds the academic response. There are no major publications, no state-sponsored studies, no satellite-based 3D scans. It is as if the formation exists in a blind spot, as if it is being collectively ignored. But those who do visit come back changed. They describe a feeling of awe, not just at the shape, but at the atmosphere, a heaviness, a presence, as if the stone itself is aware, as if it remembers. One geologist visiting the site in the early 2000s wrote in a personal journal that he could not explain what he saw. Not with erosion, not with tectonics. He was not ready to call it artificial, but he wasn't ready to call it natural either. Something happened here, he wrote, something that doesn't fit. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the Balakistan Sphinx is not here to fit, but to fracture, to challenge the boundaries we draw between the natural and the intentional, between what we know and what we think we know. Because whether natural or man-made, this stone formation forces the same questions. Why does it exist? Why does it look the way it does? And why does it resemble something built on the other side of the world? Some researchers believe the resemblance to the Egyptian Sphinx is purely visual, that we are projecting meaning onto an empty canvas. Others argue that even if it is natural, the shape may have inspired ancient travelers. Nomadic peoples may have seen this stone and taken the image with them, carrying the idea of the Sphinx across continents, eventually manifesting it in Egypt in a more elaborate form. That would make the Balakistan Sphinx not a descendant, but an ancestor, a seed, and that possibility is just as profound, because either way, natural, artificial, or ancestral, the Sphinx speaks. Not with words, not with carvings, but with form, with shape, with a presence that cannot be ignored, and what it says is simple. Look again, not just at the stone, but at the assumptions you've made, at the lines you've drawn between myth and history, between science and spirit, between what can be explained and what must simply be felt. Because sometimes the truth does not arrive as an answer. It arrives as a question carved in stone, waiting, patient, unanswered. Part 4: The Stone Circles of Senegambia. The memory of a lost people across the sun-scorched savannas of West Africa, where red soil stretches to the horizon and winds whisper through acacia trees. Thousands of stone pillars rise quietly from the earth. They form no walls, no tombs, no temples. They stand in circles, alone, silent, forgotten. And yet they are among the most precise, most enduring, and most mysterious megalithic structures in the world. This is Senegambia, the land between Senegal and the Gambia, a place that has no pyramids, no written records, no epic myths carved in stone, but it holds something else, a mystery, a presence, a pattern that stretches across nearly 350 kilometers, more than 1,000 individual sites, over 29,000 hand-carved stone columns, each one deliberately placed, each circle aligned, each monument still standing, thousands of years after its creation. They call them the Stone Circles of Senegambia. To stand among them is to feel the weight of time, not in ruins but in rhythm. These are not chaotic arrangements. They are precise, measured, repeating the same geometry again and again across hundreds of kilometers. Each circle contains between 8 and 25 upright stones. Most are carved from laterite, a type of iron-rich stone that hardens when exposed to air. Many are over 2 meters tall, some weigh several tons. And yet no one knows who built them. There are no names, no inscriptions, no images, no origin story passed down in text. They rise from the earth like thoughts forgotten by the mind but remembered by the body, like rituals that continue long after the reason is lost. Their silence is not emptiness, it is intention, and that makes them even more difficult to explain. The first question is always the same: who built them? The stones have been dated to between 300 BCE and 1600 CE. A vast time range that spans empires, migrations, and forgotten wars. Some researchers suggest they were constructed by the ancestors of the Serer people, one of the major ethnic groups in the region. Others propose earlier, undocumented societies that vanished before the rise of known kingdoms. Oral traditions speak of stone makers, of burial grounds, of sacred sites, but the names of the builders are gone, erased by time, by climate, by conquest. No cities have been found nearby, no workshops, no written instructions. Only the stones remain, and what they suggest is staggering. To create these monuments, ancient builders had to quarry massive stones from hardened earth, cut them into consistent shapes, transport them across uneven terrain, raise them upright in deliberate patterns, all without modern tools, all without wheels, all without maps. This required organization, leadership, vision, and perhaps most remarkably, collaboration across an enormous region. These were not isolated efforts. They were part of a network, a shared language of stone. And yet that language is now unspoken. Some of the circles have human graves at their center. Others have been found near burial urns, beads, iron tools, and weapons. These clues point toward ritual use. Perhaps they were cemeteries, or memorial sites, or stages for ancestral veneration. But if so, why the circles? Why the uniformity? Why the enormous labor invested over centuries? Some researchers believe the circles were designed to align with the cardinal directions. Others suggest they mark astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, or lunar phases. Still others argue that the stones were territorial markers, signs of boundaries, power, identity. But in truth, no single theory fits them all. The more we study the circles, the more they resist our categories. They are not quite tombs, not quite altars, not quite calendars. They are something else, something harder to define, something more human perhaps, and more sacred. Because what if they were never meant to do anything? What if they were meant to be, to hold space, to gather people, to make the invisible visible? Circles are among the oldest symbols in human culture. They represent cycles, wholeness, eternity. From ancient mandalas to sacred medicine wheels, the circle has always pointed to something beyond the physical. It is a space without hierarchy, a shape that includes everyone equally. Perhaps that was the point. In a world torn by boundaries, these circles created belonging. In a world marked by impermanence, these stones created memory. And yet that memory is fragile. For centuries, the Senegambian circles were ignored by scholars, dismissed as tribal relics, overgrown by grass, disrupted by livestock, undocumented by colonial powers. Only in recent decades have archaeologists begun to appreciate their scale, their consistency, and their enigma. In 2006, UNESCO recognized 4 major clusters as World Heritage Sites. These include Sine and Gain, Wanner, Washu, and Kerbach, but these are just the most visible. Hundreds more remain scattered, unprotected, unstudied, waiting. At Wanner, excavations revealed burials beneath some circles, skeletons laid in fetal position, facing east, as if anticipating rebirth. Alongside them were iron spearheads, pottery fragments, beads, and signs of fire. These findings suggest ceremony, offerings, perhaps even sacrifice. But again, the meanings are elusive. No writing survives, no central temple, no decoded myth. It's as if the builders never intended to explain themselves, as if the stones were enough, and maybe they were. Because to walk among the stone circles is to feel something shift, Time stretches, space bends, the noise of the modern world fades. You become small, not in insignificance, but in perspective. You realize that these stones have seen more than you ever will. They have witnessed droughts, floods, migration, empire, colonialism, and now rediscovery, and still they stand. Perhaps the most astonishing fact is not that they exist, but that they persist. In a world where wood rots, metal rusts, and words fade, these stones remain. They do not demand interpretation. They simply remind us that history is not always told in books. Sometimes it is arranged in silence, in symmetry, in stone. Some local communities treat the circles with reverence. Others avoid them entirely, citing ancestral energy, spirits, warnings. One village elder, when asked what the circles meant, replied simply, "They are not ours to know, only to respect." And maybe that is the most honest answer, because the mystery of Senegambia is not just about the past, it's about the present, about how we remember, about what we choose to preserve, about the kind of questions we are willing to ask when the answers may never come. What if these circles are not problems to solve but invitations to listen? What if their purpose is not function but connection? What if they remind us that meaning does not always come from explanation but from experience? We may never know who carved the stones, or why they chose circles, or what rituals once echoed through the savannah, but we know this: they are still here, still watching, still waiting, and perhaps that is enough. Part 5: The Tombs That Capture the Sun, Orkney's Silent Code. Off the northern coast of Scotland, where the wind cuts sharp and the sea gnaws endlessly at rocky shores, lies a remote cluster of islands called Orkney. At first glance, the landscape feels wild and empty. Just sheep fields, rolling mounds, sea spray, and sky. But beneath the grass, beneath the soil, beneath the quiet, a secret pulses like a buried heartbeat. A secret not written in words but in stone. For scattered across these islands are ancient structures that defy simplicity. They are not just tombs, they are not just homes for the dead. They are machines of light, instruments of memory, chambers that catch the sun. They are called chambered cairns, and some of them were built over 5,000 years ago, before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before written history as we know it. The most famous of these is Misho, a grass-covered mound with a stone passage leading to a hidden inner chamber. It does not stand out, it does not shout, it waits, low and humble. But once a year, on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice, something extraordinary happens. As the sun sets on December 21st, a single beam of light travels down the narrow corridor. It pierces the darkness and strikes the back wall of the tomb's central chamber. For a few minutes, the dead are illuminated, not by torch, not by fire, but by the sun itself. This is not accident, this is architecture, this is intention. The alignment is so precise that even modern engineers admit it is difficult to replicate. It requires tracking the sun's position over years, understanding angles, adjusting for horizon shifts, all without telescopes, all without computers, all without formal math. And yet they did it 5,000 years ago with stone and vision. Misho is not alone. Other cairns across Orkney exhibit similar alignments, with the moon, with stars, with solstices and equinoxes. They form an entire network, a kind of sacred calendar built not on paper but into the earth itself. But why? Why would Neolithic farmers living in cold, windswept isolation go to such lengths? Why align tombs with the sun? Why build chambers that only catch the light once a year? The answers remain speculative, but the patterns are undeniable. One theory suggests that these were ceremonial spaces, not just places to bury the dead, but places to honor the cycle of life and death. In many ancient cultures, the winter solstice symbolized the death of the old sun and the birth of the new, a turning point, a sacred pause, a moment when darkness reached its peak and then retreated. To catch that moment in stone was to mark eternity. To build it into architecture was to create a cosmic promise. That light would return. That life would go on. The dead were not sealed away in silence. They were placed in waiting, waiting for the light, for resurrection, for the turning of the year. It is a theology without words, a spirituality of geometry. Inside these cairns, there are no scriptures, no images, no inscriptions, just stone, silence, and the path of the sun. Some scholars suggest the builders used wooden markers outside the tombs to track the sun's motion before construction. Others propose years of oral tradition, generations of skywatchers passing down knowledge by memory alone, watching where the sun set, where shadows fell, where the stars emerged in winter. And then, with antler tools and human hands, they began to carve the earth. But the mystery does not end with the light. Within the chambers, something else waits. Rune carvings, not from the original builders, but from invaders. In the 12th century, Vikings broke into Misho and left behind graffiti. Their runes describe their presence, their boredom, their jokes, but they do not explain the tomb. They do not claim to understand it. Even the Vikings, conquerors, sailors, warriors stood in this space and felt the mystery. They carved their names, but not their answers, because the answers may have already been lost. Even by the time of the Norse raids, the knowledge behind these tombs may have vanished, swallowed by time, drowned in silence. All that remained were the stones, and yet the alignment still worked. The sun still struck the chamber. The code still functioned, which suggests something incredible, that the builders were not only astronomers and engineers, they were time travelers, not in body, but in design. They built for the future, not for themselves, not even for their children, but for whoever would come after. They trusted the light to return. They trusted someone would be watching. Perhaps that someone is us. Archaeologists have also discovered that Misho and other cairns are not isolated. They are aligned with other monuments, standing stones, stone circles, and ancient villages. Sight lines stretch from one site to another across kilometers. These are not random placements. They form a sacred geometry across the landscape. At certain times of year, the sun sets directly between two standing stones. The moon rises along a particular ridge. The stars align with carved markers. It is a system, a calendar, a map, not of space, but of time. A scholar once described Orkney as a Neolithic observatory the size of an island. And that may not be far from the truth, because these people were not primitive. They were not ignorant. They were observant, patient, devoted to the rhythm of the sky, and they carved that rhythm into stone. This raises another question. How did they preserve this knowledge without writing? How did they align stones with the solstice without charts? How did they build underground chambers with perfect orientation using only stone tools? We don't know. We can't replicate it without modern instruments. They did it with vision, with memory, with meaning. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how they built it, but why they cared so deeply. Because this was not survival, this was sacred. They were not just burying the dead. They were building continuity, between worlds, between seasons, between darkness and light, and maybe between us and them. The deeper mystery is not in the measurements, but in the message. A message whispered once a year in a single beam of sunlight that travels across 5,000 years to strike the back wall of a tomb. And in that moment, you remember that even in the coldest dark, even in the silence of death, the light still returns, not with noise, not with fire, but with precision, with elegance, with grace. The tombs of Orkney are not graves, they are poems, they are prayers, they are promises carved in stone, by hands long vanished, for eyes not yet born. Part 6. The Asuka Megalith. Japan's stone without a name tucked away in the green hills of Asuka, a quiet village in the Nara prefecture of Japan, lies a massive stone that no one can explain. It has no inscriptions, no official origin, no cultural explanation that fits. It sits silently on a slope, overlooking rice paddies and the mist-covered trees of the Japanese countryside. Some call it Masuda no Iwafune. Others simply call it strange. It does not resemble a Buddha. It is not part of a shrine. It does not match the style of any known temple or tomb. And yet it exists, alone, intentionally shaped, unmistakably man-made but utterly out of place. The Asuka megalith, often translated as the rock ship of Masuda, is enormous. 11 meters long, 8 meters wide, nearly 5 meters tall. It weighs an estimated 800 tons. And yet, it appears to have been carved with stunning symmetry and precision. Its top surface is flat, perfectly so, as if shaped by a machine. But there were no machines in ancient Japan. Not one 400 years ago, not when this stone was carved. What makes the structure truly mysterious is not just its size, but its shape. On the top, 2 rectangular ridges rise like rails. Between them, a long, deep groove runs from one end to the other. The sides are clean-cut, the corners sharp. There is no decorative motif, no sign of erosion, no practical purpose anyone can confirm. It looks like a monument, yet it commemorates nothing. It looks like a base, yet nothing stands on top. It looks like a tool, yet no one knows what it does, and so it sits. Massive, monolithic, mysterious. Most tourists pass by it without knowing what they are looking at. A stone, a relic, a sculpture. Even the locals, when asked, give different answers. Some say it was never finished. Others say it's a symbol. Some believe it's a tomb, but no one agrees. Scholars have proposed many theories, each one compelling, each one incomplete. One theory suggests the megalith was the base of a burial mound. A coffin, those ancient keyhole-shaped tombs of Japanese nobility. But no burial chamber has been found. No bones, no offerings, no passageways hidden beneath. The stone is solid, unbroken. There is nothing underneath, only earth. Another theory claims it was a kind of astronomical device, a marker for the solstice or equinox, a calendar in stone, but for a calendar it has no dials, no shadow-casting elements, no scale, no alignment confirmed by field study. If it is a timekeeping tool, it has hidden its function well. Some have proposed it was a religious platform, a sacred altar, used in Shinto rituals, a place where the kami, Japan's native spirits, could descend and receive offerings. But the Asuka region has many known ritual sites. None of them share this form. None of them use stones of this size. And so the speculation continues. Could it have been a model of something else? A prototype? An experiment? Its name, Masuda no Iwafune, means rock ship of Masuda. But no ship ever sailed these hills. Some say the name refers to its shape, the flat top, the prow-like ridges, the suggestion of movement, but others say it is meant metaphorically, a ship between worlds, between realms, a vessel not for water, but for spirit. That theory opens the door to something deeper, a spiritual interpretation. What if the Asuka stone was never meant to serve a physical function? What if it was meant to embody a principle, a cosmological truth, a symbolic gesture carved in granite? In ancient Shinto, stones were not inert, they were alive. They housed spirits, anchored the presence of the divine. Some were left natural, others were shaped. In some cases, the very act of shaping a stone was itself a ritual, an offering of labor, of intent, of reverence. Could it be that Masuda no Iwafune was a yorishiro, a physical object meant to attract and embody the kami, a monument not to commemorate but to call down power from above? There are no carvings to confirm this, no sacred rope, no torii gate, but perhaps those were never needed. Perhaps the stone itself was enough. And then there is the greatest mystery of all. How was it carved? Granite is not forgiving. It is hard, dense, resistant. Even today, shaping granite requires diamond-tipped tools, water-cooled saws, and industrial precision. But this stone was carved centuries before such technology existed. In the Asuka period, metal tools were limited. Bronze, iron, rudimentary chisels. And yet the surfaces of the Asuka megalith are flat, the angles crisp, the lines straight. There are no hammer marks, no chisel gouges, no signs of trial and error, just seamless execution. To achieve such geometry by hand would require not only skill but a plan, a blueprint, a vision. Whoever shaped this stone knew exactly what they were doing and why. But then, why stop? If it was a base, where is the structure? If it was an altar, where are the offerings? If it was unfinished, why leave it in perfect symmetry? Some theorists point to a broader mystery, one not confined to Japan. Across the world, from the Andes to Anatolia, from Easter Island to Egypt, there are megaliths that defy explanation. Stones too big, surfaces too flat, alignments too precise, as if different cultures, separated by oceans and language, were all trying to tell the same story in stone. Could the Asuka megalith be part of that story, a fragment of a global memory, a relic of a time before history, before division, before forgetting? It is possible, because Asuka is not just any village. It was once the capital of Japan. During the 6th and 7th centuries, it was the political and spiritual center of the Yamato court. It saw the birth of Japanese Buddhism, the integration of Chinese and Korean influences, the rise of monumental architecture, the shaping of imperial myth. Many ancient structures remain in the region: stone altars, tumulus tombs, sculpted reliefs, but none resemble the Masuda no Iwafune. It stands apart, unclassified, untouched. Perhaps that is why it haunts the imagination. It does not belong, and yet it remains. Some believe it was left as a warning, others as a message. Still others say it is a marker, a map, a monument built not to be used but to be found. Its location is suggestive, not hidden in the forest, not buried in soil, but placed on a hilltop, exposed as if calling out to be seen. But seen by whom? By us or by something else? The Japanese government does not classify it as a major historical site. There are no grand signs, no major research grants. It sits quietly, surrounded by farmland, visited by few. And yet it draws attention, quiet attention. The kind that grows over time because there is something in the presence of the stone, a stillness, a gravity, a whisper just below the surface of perception, something that says, this was not an accident, This was not random, this was chosen, and perhaps that is all we need to know. Perhaps the stone is not a puzzle to be solved, but an encounter to be experienced. A doorway not to another world, but to another way of seeing. In the end, the Asuka megalith may never explain itself. It may never yield to logic, to science, to narrative, because some truths are not told, they are carved. And some mysteries are not solved. They are carried across generations, across cultures, across time, in silence, in stillness, in stone. Across continents and centuries, these ancient stones still stand. They carry no names, they offer no instructions, only presence, only silence, and yet they stir something in us. A memory we can't place, a question we can't answer. Perhaps they were never meant to be solved, only witnessed, felt, remembered, because sometimes the deepest truths aren't written in words. They're carved in stone, waiting, still.